my only friend.
Kool-Aid's your only friend.
Tonight.
Well, unless you're gonna bite your finger and drop some blood on some screws, putting a binding agent on a human being, or questionable human being anyway.
When you really totally want someone to shut the fuck up, accept no substitute with that fucking binding thing.
Well, when he's telling like the chick to shut up, I'm like, it almost writes itself. Like somebody's going to shut him up.
Yeah, kinda. But it's funny because like that's probably one of the few movie quotes that I use almost every day in life. Not so much the hush part, just where he gets up in her face and says, "I said hush." The way he says it is so scary but normal.
Yeah,
Like
Nyx is really cool doing that.
Nyx is probably one of the most underrated movie villains ever. He was beyond scary. He was not human, at least not anymore.
Right.
And he controlled people so well. Such a manipulator.
Oh yeah, he just had to sink his fingernails into your head. And in case you're figuring out what the hell we're talking about, if you're listening to us just by audio, we're doing Clive Barker's Lord of Illusions. And just for the record, we both watched the director's cut. We did not do theatrical. So we might be talking about things you might, if you haven't seen the director's cut, that you might not know what we're talking about.
Well, if you have not seen the director's cut, if you have not seen the theatrical cut, whichever way, make sure you see the director's cut, because the theatrical cut is not really worth your time.
I mean, back when it first was in theaters, that's what grabbed like us initially, was like this movie is pretty good, and you gravitate towards it. It's 90s horror. It's actually really good. But when you see the director's cut, in hindsight, having seen the theatrical version being won over by it, you clearly see like, why wasn't this shown in theaters? Because this cut makes a lot more sense. It's got a lot more to it, a lot more meat on the bone for characters and story. Yes, it kind of takes away from the gore. It does slow the pacing down, but I think that's what makes this film work. This is supposed to be a noir horror movie. And I think Clive doesn't, I mean, I say Clive. I think Clive does an excellent job doing this. Yes, it's a very odd mix of genres, but this director's cut as a whole, I think, is outstanding at 2 hours. Yeah, there could have been a couple things here and there changed to kind of tighten it up a little bit, but I like this as it is. So I'm pretty happy with watching it. And Nyx, I like how they divvied that up. Beginning and ending, they kind of kept him out of the middle, except the constant inference of he's evil, he's bad, something bad's going on. I like
And
that build
coming.
up. Yep, and he's coming.
And there's nothing anyone can do. He was just foreboding.
Yes.
And I made a picture of him, or posted a picture the other day on one of our Twitter sites, basically saying I feel seen, because he's got his gut hanging out from under his shirt and a shitty ass bathrobe. His hair's all disheveled, but he's throwing fire back and forth in his hands, like juggling it. And I'm like, wow, if Kevin was a gray, like a wizard, that's probably what he would look like. Just an average day.
I really recognize that, because that's what he kind of hit, that white trash scale is what I was seeing with that. And it's like, no, I could actually buy that,
I mean, when you think cult, you think most recently, I would say probably the Branch Davidians.
Right.
Or Heaven's Gate, something to that effect.
You don't hear too much these days about that stuff, because it's largely been kind of toned down.
We have.
It's still out there. Just saying, but
yes, there's the occult will always be there. Crazy ass cults will always be there. Ask Allison Mack; she'll tell you. But this took what we knew about the Branch Davidians and made it even creepier. Like this group of complete masochists and sadists, all living out in the desert with like one set of clothes for everybody, basically.
For us, that's what it seemed like.
Yeah, and it's like it's a hypersexualized place, a hyper pain, a lot of cutting and bleeding. It's just creepy as shit. And in the
Right.
midst of all that, you have this cult leader that looks like, yeah, Bubba fucking Hotep or some shit. uh, and it was very creepy to start the movie that way. And then they let you go 13 years into the future, and it's very normal. And if you aren't familiar with Harry D'Amour at this point, normal is not going to be the way that this movie stays. Harry has darkness in his karma, and no matter how hard he tries to steer away from darkness, like he's always pulled back into some occult bullshit. Like it calls him to fix. And Harry's probably one of my favorite literary characters of this century, or that last century. He was just cool.
No, did you like Clive Barker's book entries with him? Because I know this diverged quite a bit. It's largely an original story. He just took elements of like The Last Illusion and kind of updated it with this whole story. But what did you think? I mean, I've read some of the books. I never really read The Last Illusion though, so I didn't really know how much this really like combined together. But
It's not very similar at all. I think I read that in '99, and
yeah, okay.
it's a quick read. That and In the Flesh, which is Candyman, I think.
Right.
Those are both really quick reads. But he also comes back in the second book of art, which is called Everville. And he's
Yep.
pretty much the hero of that. Like once they say his name, like everything in that book goes like, Harry's going to be in charge of the shit. It's pretty neat.
I like that one. I had a first edition, then
Did you really?
I no longer have it.
Oh, I don't know what edition I have, but I did get it signed.
Aw,
So, like, I will never part with that. I don't know where
yeah.
it's at right now, but I will
Right.
never part with it.
I had a bunch of Clive Barker first editions, and let's just say my ex kind of took the money and run, so to speak. And we'll leave it at that.
As gold diggers do, as gold diggers do.
Anyways,
Yeah, Harry's last adventure was in the book called the was it the Scarlet Gospels? Yeah, I want to say it's the Scarlet Gospels, where he fights Pinhead,
yes.
and basically it's Pinhead's ultimate demise. It's Harry's more or less demise, or his retirement, for lack of a better term. But it was a big bang for Harry to go out on. Like Harry's had some really good adventures, but none so like captivating as this movie. And I think that's because they had the noir music with it, like the saxophone type music during the sex scenes. It was just cool. It was like you said, it was that blend of 1930s and 40s mixed with something that's never really been mixed with it before. And that's what
At
Clive
least to
Barker
this
really excels
extent.
at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Barker, his books are pretty normal for the first 30 to 60 pages.
Yes.
And then you swap, and then something crazy just fucking happened. Like you're
Right.
like, did I just miss something? Is there a page missing? And his
Yeah.
books are poetically horrific. That's the best way you could really put it. And I want to say that really translates well into the director's edition here. Like a lot of the scenes that got cut were like the hallway scene at the end, where it's showing flashbacks of things that Nick said, as it's like the camera slowly panning through the hallways of the cult chambers, and there's nothing left but dust and the ghost of what happened in the past. And it was a very beautiful image. Gross, but beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, this movie was extremely well shot. I think the cinematography was great. Some of the camera angles were outstanding. And I really enjoyed how it looked and how it brought the elements of horror, desolation, isolation, angst, hurt, all sorts of emotions. You could really feel the movie pulling at you. Whether focused on one for too long or not is kind of debatable, because you could argue like it would sometimes pull you in a couple directions that it didn't need to, but at the same time it kept your mind going, having you try to think about the entire story as it was going through. And so I just love the visuals. I think it was beautiful.
Agreed. And on that note, about as far as it taking you in different directions, I think that's something that he does to make you think.
Yes.
He says on the audio commentary that too much in horror films at that point, audiences aren't required to think. They're shown who a killer is. He's got a knife. He's going to kill you.
Hello, Scream.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure he's probably talking exactly about that, or Freddy or Jason, which are fun movies, but when it comes to like a good story, that's probably not where you're going to want to look for a good horror movie.
Right.
Something like Clive or Stephen King is going to make you think. Like, you have to wonder for the first 10 minutes which one of these people is the hero of the movie, because none of them are really that heroic.
Right.
And it takes 10-15 minutes before you see Harry, where you're like, okay, this person looks like a hero, this person acts like a hero.
Even though he's sitting there drinking a beer, like completely alone in his thoughts, wondering, what the hell did I just do with this boy and the exorcism I just had to go through? It's almost like a borderline Constantine.
And that
If
keeps
only he
going
had
through
cancer
all
and
the
was smoking
books.
cigarettes.
Well, I want to say, I don't remember if it was in this book or if it was in Everville, where he recalls the demon telling him the riddle, I am you and you are love.
Oh, I
And
don't remember.
that was supposed to be like the clue to the demon's name, and we've never gotten who that demon is yet.
Right.
And when I met Clive in 2002, 2001, I asked him if there was ever going to be a third book of art. And he said, yes, there was. He just needs to, figure out what everything's going to be. So again, that was 21 years ago. I'm not really holding my breath at this point.
Yeah.
We did see what ends up happening to Harry. Harry has partners that he works with that you don't really see in this movie too much. Like, I want to say you see an agent, but that's about it. He has a woman, I can't remember her name. She's an old blind black lady, and the only thing she could see is spirits.
Oh, okay.
And she has to turn her TV up super loud so she doesn't hear them coming and asking constantly, hey, what do I do? What do I do?
Oh, I kind of remember bits of this, yes.
Yeah, and then she passes away in the last book, and Harry goes
Yeah.
blind. So he's sitting in her apartment in her chair blind, turning up the fucking TV because there's a line of ghosts wanting to talk to him. And that's where we last see Harry.
Yeah.
This has him doing much cooler shit.
I'd say so.
He goes to the fucking Pantages to see this wonderful show. He sees a guy fake his own death in a really good fashion, like that.
Yeah, that was. How do you
Swan,
fake that? Jesus Christ.
kinda. And again, one of the things that they leave out in the theatrical version is where they explain the difference between magic and illusion.
Yeah.
Not explaining that in the movie in the theatrical cut leaves you kind of like, well, what the fuck is this all about? Illusion is sleight of hand and trickery. Magic is doing it for real. And as long as everyone thinks he's an illusionist, he can do whatever the hell he wants.
Right.
You even hear the stagehands going, do you see any wires there? Well, I don't know.
And they just blow it off like, oh, hey, this ain't just don't worry about it. It's part of the show.
Yeah. And it is fun, until he gets shivved 4 or 5 times, which was a really neat contraption. He builds this fucking death trap so he could fake his own death. Like, he had this thing planned for some time.
Well, yeah.
And he does it because he knows that his friends are getting killed off by Butterfield, which was Nix's assistant.
Yep.
Who wasn't really worthy. And
Hell
finally, no, although he was the only one that was most true and loyal to Nix.
Yes.
he spends that 13 years trying to acquire the magic necessary and build the tools necessary to break the mask that he's got binding him.
Right.
And no one else did anything except for him. Like the rest of the cult just kind of scatters off waiting. They go living normal lives and waiting to hear that Nix is going to come back.
Which is something they cut out as well, because when they get notified homecoming, they get a little letter or whatever it was. Then they just go ahead, they start smoking their own family. So in a very particular cut scene, you see the after effects of them, killing their family and then going back to welcome him home.
And it's like this old fashioned country type song too. Like
I know, it's
bluegrass.
so random. For me, it felt like something totally out of the 70s. Like it's that much out of time and context for like 95.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing about this movie. Like it holds up really well. There's nothing in this movie that isn't pretty much the same way today.
Right. The only thing you can argue is some of the visual CGI effects are a bit sketchy. But hey, it's Lord of Illusions. You can almost look at this movie as setting up their narrative of this is supposed to be fake. No,
Yeah.
This is supposed to be real. So kind of can play with you can kind of justify it in your mind to a point that, yeah, the CGI is a little, but if you're paying attention to the movie, you kind of roll with it. It works out just fine.
Yes. I mean, you have to know what time period you're watching it in and remember what technology was available at that time. This was 1995, so the best that they could do was Nintendo 64 graphics. Like, there's a scene where Swan is making some sort of illusion in the house.
Yes.
And it looks like something out of Star Fox.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, because the way it folds and like the different triangles and squares and hexagons, and I'm like, is this a kaleidoscope or what are we watching?
Yeah, like my shit didn't even make that any cooler. Trust me. I tried smoking more. I mean, if you can get past that one part, the rest of it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
The fire effects are better than what you would expect. And
I thought so too.
Clive likes to use. Yeah, he likes real fire. He always has. He knows how to do special effects. He studies that sort of thing. He knows how to get around certain problems, like the steam that they had coming up from the floor, because Nix kills all the fucking followers for being useless. Basically, he escapes the grave, so he has to give them back to the grave in exchange. He has them sinking into the mud, and it starts to look like a California reservoir bed, like just completely dried up when they were done. And he had steam coming up from all that. And what that did in real life was make all that like sand just turn into mush.
Right.
So it took them some extra time doing that scene. But again, that practical effect looked way better than the N64 Star Fox effect.
All the practical effects were amazing. I mean, the KMB guys were on point at this time. They were making their name and staking their claim. Like, watch out, Savini, KMB's here in town. And I thought that practical effects, hands down, were like 2 thumbs up on this flick.
I mean, you get so many different things that they make you flinch. Like,
or creep you out. Unsettling.
What was it, Valentin? The assistant Valentin, where Butterfield sticks his knees basically right over here. So it's like, you're looking down from Butterfield's dick. If Butterfield's dick had eyes, you'd be looking square down at Valentin. And you
overhead shot. Yep.
Yeah, you see Butterfield's hand come down with the scalpel in it, and he sticks it up under his lip and asks some questions. And when he doesn't know, he starts cutting underneath the fucking gum line. And you're just kind of like, oh, god damn.
Now that's torture of a new extent for me. But I liked how they did that. Like, they really set up like Butterfield as this total creep. Like, he's villain number 1. Yes. Or even lieutenant villain to Nix, which at least they gave him enough throughout the movie of him being the sadistic creep, always working to bring his main man back. It's totally fun. And then to watch how it all turns around at the end was very nice to see. Like evil does not trust evil. Like it's bad all around. And even still, after even he got betrayed, he still kept going after our hero and heroine.
Yeah, like that's the thing about Nix. Like he forgives Swan for trying to kill him.
Yeah.
He comes back from the grave still wanting to know where Swan is so he could finish giving him the power to help
But
him.
he's dead. No, he's not. But he's dead. Smack. No, he's not.
Yeah, and then fucking uses a Birkenstock to kick fucking Butterfield across 3 rooms, basically Superman style.
Exactly.
I mean, he was great, and that was him being weak.
Yeah.
And the going back to the special effects, the way that they had him look when he came back and they pulled all the metal off his face,
Oh my God.
you thought it was like decomposition at first, and maybe it kind of was to a point. But he's got this big butthole, like serious for real butthole in like the middle of his forehead. You know how everyone's got that the third eye, where if you expose that, you'll supposedly be able to have visions more or less. That's what he had. He had this like pulsating, and I want to make sure that you understand that word for the people at home. It was pulsating and throbbing like a heartbeat was in this butthole on his forehead.
Yeah, it had like a mind of its own. It just kept convulsing. It was totally meant to unsettle you and creep you out.
Yeah, because it looked like something was going to poke out, pull back in, poke out, pull back in. And you're like, is that a doo-doo? Is that a turtle? What is that? I don't know, but it's gross.
Or is that some claw about to reach out from his skull? Like, what exactly is in this guy that just came out of the grave? What did he bring back with him? Ends up proving to be like nothing. What?
Yeah, like he can shapeshift, or he's turning into some sort of monster is basically what it is. Like
That's what initially when I saw this movie the first time, I was like thinking, okay, something's gonna like rip his whole body apart. Like I'm thinking like Hellraiser level, like something's going to go completely fucking sadistic and crazy here. Didn't really hit that, but it didn't really need it in hindsight.
no, because again, he was a formidable villain.
Yes.
Just the actor commanded that presence. He was always such a powerful actor in everything he did.
Yeah.
Which I did not realize he did finally pass away. He passed away in 2015. He had complications from diabetes.
Oh, David von Bargen?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he finally succumbed to it in 2015. And I was like, oh my goodness, that really sucks, because he was fantastic.
I've seen him in other roles, but this is the one I remember typically the most.
This and Oh Brother Where Art Thou, I think, are his 2 most powerful movies.
Yeah.
Or his 2 most powerful roles. That sweet summer rain line in Oh Brother Where Art Thou is like scary, because he's actually enjoying the fact that it's a nice night to fucking hang somebody and burn them in effigy. So, but he was just always a scary person, and I don't think they really could have gotten anyone else acting at the time as the role of Nix and have it be just as good. And the same thing could be said for Scott Bakula playing Harry D'Amour.
That's what I was going to ask you next is how do you feel he lived up to your expectations of Harry, and then at the same time, how well do you think he did? Because I thought Scott was an odd casting choice, but I thought he did a pretty damn good job. And if we had gotten a second movie with him as Harry, I think he would have completely nailed it at that point, because now he's had a film under his belt with some good experience with the character, and now he could sink his teeth into something new.
Yeah, and he has that understanding that Harry has this tie to the occult that he doesn't want. He's very much like fucking Constantine, only without the wanting to be part of anything. But his job is basically to vanquish evil where he finds it, or cults, solve murders, whatever happens. when he thinks that he's just going to go fucking do a insurance fraud claim. God, that was great. Him not thinking that was going to work out well. But going back to your question, the movie was my first experience, so I hadn't read Clive Barker prior to seeing this.
Okay.
So I didn't have any experience with Harry prior to seeing I'm gonna say Sam Beckett. Without seeing Scott Bakula. After having seen this in the rest of the books, that's all I could picture is his face and his voice reading all of Harry's lines, because he was perfect. Clive basically hit the nail on the head when he said Scott Bakula is one of the most perfect everymen he's ever seen.
He really is.
And I'd say, yeah, him and someone like Nathan Fillion both have everyman type personality where they could play just about any type of person.
Yeah, I'd like to see him go a little more extreme. I've never really seen him go completely off the deep end in a role. Mm-hmm. But that's probably why, because they play the everyman a little too well, that I'd like to see him go a little crazy and do something different. Like, I'd love to see Scott Bakula and Nathan Fillion as these evil, twisted through heads, and see him go completely nuts. But that's not likely to happen, and that's completely fine. I'm okay with that. I've seen Scott in a lot of things, even up to his NCIS show that he's been working on. And, I've been a fan since Quantum Leap. Most everything I've seen him in, I have loved. I even love Necessary Roughness, for crying out loud. The football comedy movie. I know Sinbad's in it. I don't care. Jason Bateman's in it. It's a fun sports movie, and I think it's a hell of a fun time. But I can go all the way to like Star Trek Enterprise and be like, that's a quality Star Trek captain right there too. So he goes from like time jumping to football comedies to this to NCIS New Orleans, I think it's called. And he brings it every time. It's one little soapbox moment. It's too bad we never got our final Quantum Leap with him and Dean Stockwell before Dean passed away. I don't care about the new show.
I probably won't watch it at all.
No.
It's not my thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the things that I want to talk about, who did not get any credit whatsoever for this film.
Famke, I know, I love her so much.
She's great. But her nipples got absolutely no credit in this movie. And they're in the movie a lot. Like, look at them. Look at
it was cold on that particular day, apparently. She was feeling a little nipply. And I see your strategic placement with the camera and your head in this shot, in between them.
Well, at least I didn't go.
Well, you just did. Now you got us demonetized.
Now, here is a post-coital hug. And if you notice, let's see, right here, all around there, she's got her head up in his junk. Now,
the back of her head.
Yeah, the back of her head. So for our virgin listeners or people that don't have mustaches, hair captures everything wet. I would have loved to have seen the shower after her getting up. Fucked up hair.
That's such an awkward, honestly, a true assessment, all jokes kidding aside, this was one of the weirdest shots I think I've seen of post-coital, post-sex, like whatever's. Like, who really lays like that? Serious question. Nobody really does that, because he looks like a freaking pretzel. And you know why it's staged like that? It's to cover him up. But like, man, imagine the scene that day with those two shooting and they're going like, we gotta lay it like, how? Like, what? I mean, and it's notorious in Hollywood that shooting like scenes like this are usually awkward, and they're crazy because you gotta stage them and everybody's watching, and you gotta be like, I gotta pretend I love you and not pretend like 200 people aren't watching us while we're doing this. Awesome.
Kinda.
So credit to both of them for putting up with this. All jokes aside, like, but wow, what a position that's not completely real.
What happens if you have to fart though? Like if you're Harry, like where do you get rid of that she's not gonna know?
Kevin brings the tough questions every single time to our 0 Point reviews. He's the reason we call it 0 Point.
0 Point. Listen, to prove for our viewers, the people listening, go ahead and check this out on YouTube. To prove that I was telling the truth, I have actually met Clive Barker before.
Oh, you had more hair.
I had a lot more hair, and so did he. He was seriously one of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah, he's a very nice dude.
Yeah, he and his husband David both are super sweet people.
Yeah.
Like I always will like bend over backwards to read one of his books, or if he's going to be in town for a signing, I'll always go. Which again,
I wish I had my first editions. I still have my Thief of Always though, which is my favorite book. Just throwing that out there real quick.
The Thief of Always is pretty goddamn great. Like it's basically Peter Pan without Peter Pan, and it's just it's a smart book for kids. Basically, is what it is, or a scary story without gore for kids.
It's the book that introduced me to him well before I ever watched Hellraiser or anything else. So,
really,
yep, that was my introduction to Clive.
I think Hellbound Heart might have been my first book.
That was my second book.
Was it?
What a twist.
Well, it's funny because I could tell you this Lord of Illusions is my third DVD. I bought 3 DVDs when I first bought a DVD drive, and I was going to start changing movies. I bought The Big Lebowski, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Lord of Illusions.
Excellent. Yeah.
And they are still 3 of my most favorite films. Well, not necessarily Texas Chainsaw because that has Franklin in it. But anyway, go watch your Texas Chainsaw if you guys didn't catch that one. It's a very important movie to me. I've always liked it. And I know I said last week that there was only like 2 movies out of the 90s that I liked. There is 3. This would be the second one. Probably the one I like the most. Because like he said, the story makes you think. You're constantly wondering what's going to happen. Some of it you could predict.
Yeah.
But a lot of it you don't see coming. Like the scalpel up in the guy's fucking gum line. That was kind of horrible.
The devil is in the details, I believe is what you're saying there.
Kinda.
I know you say predictable, and that's nice to lure you into a false sense of security because you don't, because then he changes it around and you really don't know what's going on, except for what's happening in front of the screen in real time for you. That's probably why it was smart to go with an original story as opposed to adapting one of the other stories, where then you'd have people, well, that's not really like the book.
Well, that's the thing about Clive Barker is he takes his books, and then when he directs a movie, like it unfolds like 4 or 5 different ways from what the book was. And it's not worse, it's always better because it takes what he did and then he like garnishes more wonderful things all around it and builds all this more structured characterization and storytelling, and it's fucking phenomenal. And as far as visually goes, it's stunning. His photographer's eye is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, he gets ragged on way too much. And I think part of that comes from the fact that Hollywood has never really fully gotten behind him as a filmmaker. After Hellraiser, he did what, Hellraiser 2, and then we got Nightbreed, we got I don't know about Rawhead Rex, to be honest with you, if he directed that one or not, but then we got Lord of Illusions. And basically all the movies he's worked on like this have all been, in my opinion, excellent, top notch. I think when they got to, I know Hellraiser 3 is kind of iffy amongst fans, but I still like it. When they got to 4 is when the studio said, we can make a Hellraiser movie better than you. The guy who wrote the goddamn story, the guy who did the first 3 freaking movies, you think you can do a better job doing Hellraiser than him? Okay, let's see how the next 6 did. Yeah, we don't. See how well you did.
Everything after 4 was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like
I know one of them in there is actually decent, but the most of them are
Kirsty's in the fifth one, and
Yep.
that one was pretty terrible. I bought that like boom as soon as I saw her name in it. But it didn't do her character any justice whatsoever. So I just wasn't. I only watched it once and almost threw away the DVD.
Yeah.
The last one, was that where they had the new Pinhead and they go down to Mexico? That one was okay for a while. I have not seen the one on Hulu yet.
Yeah, I have not either. If you guys want us to check that one out, put a comment below. We'll look at it for putting into the rotation here.
Yeah, I will not bitch, bulk, whatever about having to watch a new Hellraiser movie.
Oh hell no.
As long as he's got his blessing on it.
I think it does.
Well, the Hellraiser TV show is something that he's been working on for like 30 years at this point.
Oh, I know. I've been hearing about that since forever.
That the night where I did meet him, he was actually telling me that he'd been in the plans to go with Sci-Fi Channel, I think it was at the time. Oh. And can you imagine how shitty that would have been?
God, no. I mean, it might have been all right for a season, but after that, it would have gotten. Well, it would have depended on Sci-Fi Channel.
It would have had shitty special effects, shittier than what we saw here. Which again, the only part about this movie that the special effects you could have just been like, do away with that was the polygon scene. They have a hologram or a ghost that is.
That was pretty all right.
That was fine. It looked better than the Red Queen from Resident Evil. Excuse me. That thing looked pretty cool, and the reason because it was fucking one of the Scoleri brothers from Ghostbusters 2. Yeah. But that thing looked cool. It was plain enough. There was no need to do the virtual reality vision or the special effects. It looked too much like Lawnmower Man, which didn't do well at the time.
Oh God, don't put that image back in my head.
Like I will always watch the first Lawnmower Man if it's on TV. Like I do like the first one.
That's all right, but Jobs War is like, no, thank you for me.
No, I mean it's got Matt Frewer, so I mean hooray. But he does not save that film.
No.
But I mean it's always nice to see Matt Frewer. If you want to see a good movie with him in it, go watch The Stand instead. So speaking of good show, we talked about the Pantages too. I forgot to mention one of the stunning images that he put in his head, and actually got some choreography in this show. They brought in from Vegas the naked dancers of Cirque de Oh Hey. There is more wang and booby in this movie than you fucking possibly shake a wang at.
Although their outfits were largely airbrushed and whatnot, so it didn't actually have the full nudity going on.
Yes, that's true. Like there was pasties happening and cover-ups, a little bit of spandex on the banana hammock, but for the most part, this movie was pretty revealing. And again, if you're not familiar with Clive Barker, he's very open about sexuality.
Yeah.
He makes it romantic, he makes it putrid all at the same time, and it's really great. Okay, so that was one of the other things, speaking of putrid, that didn't work out well, is where Nyx gets inside people's heads and can show you what humans look like to a god, and how basically the skin comes away and there's nothing left but mud and shit. Nothing in that scene where the skin peels away said mud and shit, not a single piece of it.
I think that's why they use the word jelly.
I don't know.
Like, we look like jelly to. Yeah.
It was not good. And he comes up with some really neat and imaginative type monsters that are made out of poop in, say, fucking whatchamacallit, The Great and Secret Show.
Yeah.
And for what they could have done, it wasn't there. Like they could have made a better visual. They could have actually had jelly start to melt away like poo or fondue, what have you. I don't know. But the special effect wasn't there.
Yeah, if they could have made this now, I think Clive would be like, all right, let's do this the way I really want to do a visual. Like if he could have a chance for a redo just on the visual effects. I know that's like heresy. Like, you don't go back and George Lucas the shit out of your movie. But
that one scene though.
Yeah, there are times where it's like you kind of wonder if they could have done what they really want, what they were really visualizing, if it would have actually worked out and looked pretty damn cool or not. I mean, this was a limitation of technology at the time. This isn't George Lucas being like, oh no, I want to change my story halfway through my life, and then I want to go back and re-edit scenes and just completely change everything about a scene. Then that's something else. This is just, hey, I actually had a different visual in mind. Can we go back and do it? Well, it would work out. Who knows? But I think if he could remake this now, and you could have maybe Scott Bakula come back as an older Harry, I don't know how all that would work, but I think that some of his material is ripe for a reboot or even a relaunch, so to speak.
Nightbreed would be one. This could be one, although to me, this is, with the exception of those two visual effects, this is a pretty perfect movie for me, especially for the 1990s. Because the 1990s were not about thinking. They were not about quality. They were about extremity and hotness and fashion and all sorts of shit and explosions. This doesn't really have any of that, but it will scare the fuck out of you.
I think there are some gems in the 90s that, we might disagree on a little bit, but, I like Screamers with Peter Weller. I like Dark City. I like Lord of Illusions. Want to talk another horror movie? There's Deep Rising, but I think that's more late 90s.
Kevin O'Connell's in that one.
Yep.
Okay, so speaking of Kevin O'Connell, I think this movie is his best role. This is the only time where you don't see him as the shitty side character, caricature like in The Mummy. He's playing a guy with complex emotions.
I'm gonna agree with you on that one.
Yeah,
even though I love him in The Mummy and like all these other roles, but I'm gonna agree with you on that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, like he was believable as a spineless coward, and I'm sure he's not, but he played Swan as a spineless coward really well. Like, it shows him telling himself, get out of the car, so he can go help Harry, and he can't.
I think what was throwing me half the time with him was his long flowing locks just seemed a little out of place, but totally like a God, what's the magician who's got the long flowing hair that's like a rock star?
Donnie Blaze.
Not Donnie Blaze. I want to say David Blaine, but it's not him.
Chris Angel.
Yeah, Chris Angel. It's like, oh man, the hair does not do him like justice. It just seems like it's something out of the 80s that he just kept with,
Yes, the long but not mullet look.
It was getting there. Skullet look.
It was disheveled. He looked like in certain scenes like Jack Nicholson when he's drunk and his hair's all fucked up and shit.
He looked way more homeless during the main movie than he did when he was actually doing the homeless scenes, when his hair was like all neat and pristine. I'm like,
yeah, when he had it in a bun.
Like, what are you doing?
Well, okay, so with him and that scene, you see him levitating the car over Harry, and at the end, where you think he's been killed 3 times already, he lifts Harry up. And in the Scarlet Gospels, Harry explains magic, the use of magic with humans, is that there's a cost to it each time you use it. And I think he finally dies at the end because he used so much magic with what little life he had left to levitate Harry. And they didn't really explain that.
Yeah, that was missing from that.
It was a great scene. It was great to have Dorothea and Harry narrowly escape, of course, and then have Nyx's spirit, just the spirit, come up like sand out of the center of the earth, rip all the flesh off fucking Swan's body, rip everything that it can in that room apart, and then just fade away back to hell forever. And it's like, it ends that way in the silent hallway with like we said, with his narrations, past narrations, and it just feels like this haunted room. There's nothing left except for echoes of a horrid, tragic past.
Right.
And if that doesn't make you want to see this movie, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you.
I would consider this an underrated gem of the 90s. So, and not many people have heard about it. So this is going to be new for a lot of newer people. But hey, gotta go with this. This is one of Clive Barker's best, in my opinion. I mean, this is not Hellraiser. Don't go in thinking you're gonna get a Hellraiser or a Hellraiser kind of style movie. It ain't it. Hellraiser is a completely different league. This is still a fun story. Watch the director's cut. Hey, if we're gonna do 5 stars, I'm going full 5 on this one. Yeah, I know the graphics. Yeah, there's some little drawbacks, but for overall enjoyment and quality of movie, you get acting, writing, directing, everything's top notch. I'm going 5 out of 5.
I'd say the same thing. 5 out of 5. And again, I would say the same thing. I did say the same thing about fucking Event Horizon and Demon Knight. Like, those are 3 perfect movies to me. And this one might be my favorite out of the 3. It really could be. I mean, I love Demon Knight. Everybody knows that. I fell in love with Billy Zane in that movie. I was already in love with Scott Bakula from Sam Beckett, of course. So it's like, as soon as I see him, it's like, yeah, someone's gonna get their ass kicked. But yeah, this would be the 5. This would be the 5. And there's not many that I would say would be a 5. Not many horror films are a 5-star movie.
Right.
And again, I'm giving it 5 for the same reason you are. I love the story. I love the characters. I love the author. I love the director. I love everything about it. It's just that small 2% of visual effects where you're just kind of like, that's hokey.
Well, I can point at Warlock, one of my favorite movies. I think it's Warlock Armageddon, where it's the CGI baseball. And it's the only time in the movie that takes you completely out and you're like, oh my God, if they could go back. I'm not a fan of altering, like I've said earlier. But if you could go back and fix that baseball, make it fit, make it look right, doesn't have to be pristine, but just it can't look like it did, like a goddamn video game.
Was it when it was like he stopped it in the air?
Yeah, and it spins around and then he throws it. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ.
That's right. I remember
They actually did the same thing in another Scott Bakula movie. It's Major League 3, Back to the Minors. One of the pitchers throws the baseball and it's all CGI. They never actually throw the baseball. And it's hard to watch, but the movie is just, it's a lot of fun. And you still got Bob Uecker, but it's that whole CGI thing of like the 90s when CGI just was not good.
You know, God bless him for trying. Like, a lot of movies tried, a lot of shows tried. Some of our
gotta
favorites
start somewhere.
Yeah, Tremors. Tremors, the TV show. The only thing holding it back is the CGI, but that's what they had to work with at the time. So
that was their budget
about it.
Yep.
Yes, that's true. So yeah, they couldn't afford all the big puppets and shit. They could show you more ass blasters by making CG ass blasters than making one and then trying to replicate it dozens of times.
Exactly.
So I mean, I get that. And again, if you're a younger person, you have to understand where we were technologically in our society at this point.
Yeah.
This is one of those films where the story and the characters really make you forgive the kind of caca that you see.
Yeah.
Or the caca that you don't see. Like I said, nothing about those fucking scenes screams shit or mud to me. I wanted to, okay, when I say I want to see caca, that's going to sound really gross. Not the way I mean it. I wanted to see them like turn into like putrid jelly and poop and shit when their skin came off.
And that's Kevin.
I'm just a sick fuck. I'm sorry. I've read most of his books. I'm used to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a fucking demon in the Scarlet Gospels, I think, that has pubes made out of fire and basically butt rapes a guy. I don't know where the fuck it had, what the reason behind that was, but that really stood out for me. So moments like that are par for the course in Clive Barker's stories, if you haven't actually like read them.
Gotcha.
Yeah, which I know you have. I'm just talking to people at home that haven't read them.
Indeed.
It's worth it. It's worth it. Read the books. Like the
His
books
books are
are
a
great.
definite trip, and he's definitely got a flair for writing.
I like him more than Stephen King.
I do too. I mean, that's usually the big argument amongst fans of like both is like, well, who do you like better, Stephen King or Clive Barker? Well, there's way more Stephen King fans out there because his books have been more mass produced and more widespread, and they're a little more mainstream. Clive Barker's a little more focused on horror. If you want horror of different magnitudes, different levels, then Clive is your guy. If you want just what you think is more a little mainstream, not so crazy, then go with Stephen King. It's okay. It's like comparing Hammer horror to Universal horror movies. Like,
Yes.
it's just different. And there's room for both. You can be a fan of both. You can be a fan of one or the other. It's okay. Be a fan of who you like. But Clive did a fantastic job with this movie. Sorry he didn't get to have his director's cut in theaters. But hey, we get it now. It's on home video. You can go find the DVDs if you just want a DVD. There's a Scream Factory Blu-ray that's got both cuts on it in HD. They're excellent. It's a great release from Scream Factory. I'm not sure what the price is on that right now, but I busted mine out, and that's how I watched this, and I had a very good time. Picture quality is chef's kiss. It's very excellent. So definitely go out and check that out. And Kevin, you have any other thoughts before we wrap up here?
I don't think so. Other than just reiterating what you'd said, the difference between Clive and Stephen King is just an artistic point of view. They're both master craftsmen at what they do. They will both terrify you in your sleep and waking nightmares. Clive's will make you dream a little bit more than Stephen King's will. And when I say dream, he makes you use your imagination. No, I mean,
I'm
yes,
kidding.
but he makes you use your imagination and paints pictures with words that King could spend 3 paragraphs describing a leaf, and sometimes he does, but it won't sound as beautiful as what Clive can make anything sound, whether it be putrid shit or eternal love, the sea of quiddity. He just makes things poetic. And I don't know if that's his British upbringing or just his certain point of view, but he's great. If you haven't read him, go read him. Go watch his movies. He's the best.
Excellent to hear. And hey, take that to heart. However you want to go is however you want to go. Thank you for tuning in to 0 Point Reviews. Hey, hit that like button. Comment below. We'd love to hear any thoughts you have about this movie or anything else that we've mentioned during this review. And make sure you subscribe, hit that bell notification, and we'll see you next time. Make sure you check us out on all of our social media platforms. We got Facebook, Twitter. We are at Suns and Shadows. We're also on Instagram at Suns and Shadows Cast. We are at SunsAndShadows.com. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll see you down the road.